everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Thank you all for the love and support you've shown me and the channel.
Junji Ito, I shall smash Hellstar Remina. Chapter 98 to 110, 3 heads and 6 arms form. 1,386 words. If one arm could grow, so could 2, 3, 4. Within moments, Kawakami Tomi had taken on the form of a creature with 6 arms and 3 heads. She looked down at her 4 new limbs and flexed them experimentally, like a child playing with a new toy. 2 arms threw shadow boxes in the air, imitating a boxer's stance. Another 2 folded across her chest. The remaining pair stayed busy in their own way, one elbow propped under her chin, the other absently twirling a loose strand of falling hair. Not flexible enough. I need more heads. Kawakami Tomi's brow furrowed slightly. She lowered her head. The flesh of her neck thickened, the skin on either side swelling at a visible, unsettling speed. First on the left, a thin fissure crept from behind the ear down to the jaw. The skin peeled open on both sides like the petals of a moist flower, exposing the glistening, pulsing tissue beneath. Then, within that blurred and shifting mass of form, the outlines of eye sockets, a nose bridge, and lips began to take shape. In a matter of seconds, a second head grew fully and completely from the left side of her neck. At the same moment, a third head emerged from the right. 3 perfectly identical faces crammed onto a single neck, however, was, by any measure, a tight fit. The moment Kawakami Tomi tried to turn her head, her cheek bumped directly into the ear of the face beside hers. TCH. You're in the way. The central head muttered its complaint without reservation. Still, with 2 extra heads sharing the command load, all 6 arms became noticeably more coordinated. Fingers opened and closed. Wrists turned. Each arm performed a different motion with a fluency that marked a clear step forward. She tried taking a step forward. Her body lurched violently, she nearly pitched straight into the ground. She caught herself just in time, bracing several arms against the earth. A standard frame can't support the weight of 3 heads and 6 arms. I'll need to scale up. Analyzing the flaw in her body's structure, Kawakami Tomi commanded another division. A layer of new tissue, glistening with a wet sheen, seeped from every pore across her skin, like living, animate wax in slow motion. It proliferated at a rate visible to the naked eye, spreading rapidly across her entire body. The circumference of her arms, the thickness of her torso, the girth of her legs, all grew in tandem, evenly, uniformly. This was not inflation. It was not bloating. It was something built outward from the body's surface, a genuine, structural expansion of flesh, like pressing fresh clay onto the outside of a sculpture. The clothes that had fit her moments before were stretched to their limit, strained into a second skin against her rapidly enlarging frame, and let out a shrill, strain-tearing sound under the pressure. Within a few breaths, Kawakami Tomi's height stabilized at roughly 2 meters. Bone and muscle had grown in sync, and she stood solidly on 2 feet at last, 3 heads and 6 arms no longer top-heavy, no longer ungainly. And yet, that imposing, massive frame topped with her still gorgeous face, and still porcelain skin produced a wrongness that no amount of staring could resolve. It was deeply, fundamentally uncanny. Is this the limit? Amaziah Rin extended a finger and poked her in the abdomen. His fingertip sank into pale, yielding skin. 3 heads, 6 arms, and gigantism. I won't deny these are abilities that could give you an edge in combat. But your potential shouldn't stop here. He wasn't satisfied. He hadn't expected her to become Kars, the ultimate being, overnight, but a transformation at this level could only bully humans who didn't use firearms. Isn't this enough? Kawakami Tomi flashed a wicked grin. She reached out with both hands, grabbed Amaziah Rin around the waist, and lifted him effortlessly into the air. The gap in strength was so absurd he couldn't struggle free. He could only hang there, held up like a doll. Looking down at her 3 faces, all wearing the same expression of impish amusement, Amaziah Rin could only sigh and roll his eyes. Bullying me? Sure, you've got that covered. But the thing you want to kill is a demon, isn't it? You really think you can fight the apology demon with this level of strength? The moment she heard the apology demon's name, Kawakami Tomi's expression darkened. Her grin vanished. Her interest in tormenting Amamiya Rin evaporated. You always have to ruin everything. She opened both hands. Amamiya Rin dropped straight down, hit the ground, and stumbled before catching his footing. And it's easy to criticize when you're not the one doing it. Kawakami Tomi shook all 6 arms with irritation, and her enlarged form began slowly contracting. The extra heads and arms melted back into her body like wax returning to the mold, restoring her original shape. She adjusted her torn clothing with restless hands, her voice carrying the full weight of her annoyance. Do you think controlling a body is easy? Just being able to consciously trigger the division is already incredibly difficult. Don't treat me like I'm empty-headed. I have thought about this, I've mapped out the path to getting stronger. Directed division of bone and muscle. Internal organ division within the body. Combining division and fusion to produce more efficient muscle configurations. Stimulating bone proliferation to form an exoskeleton. Splitting functional tissue layers beneath the skin. But it's not that simple, is it? You were the one who told me I was reaching too high, and now you're the one making exactly those demands. She threw it all out in one breath, pouting and fuming. She had worked painstakingly to gain conscious control over her body's division, and then gone further, developing a combat enhancement form that actually worked. And this was what she got. Amamiya Rin didn't encourage her. He didn't praise her. He just piled on more requirements. Did he think she didn't know they needed more power to fight the apology demon? He always had to spoil everything. Infuriating. Do you think we haven't been trying? We've been working at this for years. Do you have any idea how unbelievable that is for us? That's right. Working hard to get stronger, besides us, is there any other Tomi in the world who would do something like that? If you want so much, why don't you try it yourself? Standing there criticizing without doing a thing. Rin is such an idiot. We've already done something incredible, a word of praise won't kill you. You're always so harsh with us. Why can't you spare even a little of the patience you show everyone else for us? Strike. We're going on strike. The surrounding Tomis swarmed in from all directions, voices piling on top of one another, each one chiming in with her own grievance, a chorus of wounded, indignant complaints that came at him from every angle, relentless and impossible to field. Okay. I was too impatient. Amamiya Rin raised both hands in prompt surrender, his tone softening immediately. Managing to consciously control division and achieve even a basic transformation, that genuinely is significant progress. You've all done well. But I know your potential goes beyond this. You can go even further. He knew perfectly well, there was no harder battle in the world than arguing with a woman. And truthfully, this time, he had been too demanding. For Kawakami Tomi's personality to have endured this far was already extraordinary, exactly as they had said. No other Tomi could have pushed herself through this kind of training. Even knowing the apology demon existed, any other Tomi would simply have chosen to avoid it. The fact that these ones had persisted, that genuinely, was because of one person. _______. Read more, Walnut-chan. New history, Re:0, Rathrout Yandere Emilia watches the projection. White heavy checkmark access up to 40 advanced chapters of all stories. White heavy checkmark receive exclusive content and updates. Help us hit our community goals. 100 Power Stones equals +1 bonus chapter for everyone. P. Walnut-chan. Chapter 99, Differentiation of Billions of Living Beings. 1,433 words. Honestly, was that so hard? A few considerate words, just a little consideration. Is that really too much to ask? When Amamiya Rin finally relented and said something gentle, the Tomis were satisfied at last. One by one, they broke into bright, self-satisfied grins, the corners of their mouths curling upward with barely concealed smugness. For a man who couldn't be charmed, getting him to soften his attitude, to show genuine goodwill toward them, that was no small achievement in the eyes of the Tomies. We won't slack off on training, you know. We've got a clear direction now, so just wait for our good news. Then give it your best. I'm rooting for you. Amamiya Rin's expression didn't change. He didn't mind lowering his guard a little to give them some praise. It wasn't purely about self-interest. Part of it was simply that they'd spent too much time together. Years of living side by side, even with an enemy, that kind of closeness breeds something like attachment. And the relationship between Amamiya Rin and Tomi was far more complicated than mere enemies could ever be. Dream world time might be worth nothing on paper, but it still slipped away, second by second. He didn't know how long had passed. But at some point, Amamiya Rin was seized by a powerful, creeping sense of dislocation. Without warning, everything around him grew distant and blurred. He realized he was about to wake up. Like clawing his way up from the bottom of a fathomless sea, Amamiya Rin forced his eyes open. His field of vision was filled by an unfamiliar ceiling, pure white, completely bare, nothing but a single, plain flush-mount light overhead. From somewhere nearby came the noise of a television and the bright, lilting laughter of women. A bone-deep exhaustion coiled around every inch of him. Each breath felt like it was wringing every last drop of strength from his body. On reflex, he sank into deep dhyana. A long, silent stretch passed before his mind finally cleared. Sleeping inside a dream doesn't do the body any good at all. Amamiya Rin's mouth curved into a faint smile, and for a moment something unexpected flickered through him, a strange pang of nostalgia. This exhaustion, this was exactly how he'd felt before entering the dream world. No. Before his sudden cardiac arrest. To be precise. After 20 years, his body had reawakened, and with it, that same bone-grinding fatigue had returned in full. With considerable effort, Amamiya Rin turned his stiff neck and took stock of his surroundings. It was a room, not particularly spacious but clearly arranged with care. The layout was immediately readable. The desk by the window was buried under books and stacked documents. The walls were covered in clippings and photographs. In the corner stood a camera bag and tripod, alongside his own backpack. Against the opposite wall sat a small television. On its screen, two female comedians in garish, oversized cartoon costumes were mugging shamelessly at the camera, their makeup gaudy, and their expressions grotesquely exaggerated. So last night, my refrigerator spoke to me. Oh? What did it say? It said, "It's so cold in here." Well, of course it did. Ha 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 ha. The two comedians delivered their material that generated not even the faintest ghost of amusement, with the particular, desperate energy of performers who are absolutely convinced they are killing it. The moment the punchline landed, they erupted together in a long, deliberate, painfully drawn-out burst of laughter. The screen obligingly cut to a cheap, explosive laughter text effect, complete with canned audience noise. Amamiya Rin's brow creased slightly. This performance was stiff. Painful. The material felt like something unearthed from the previous century. He couldn't locate the joke in any of it. A few more seconds of watching, and he could feel the second-hand embarrassment beginning to flare in the back of his skull. But what he found completely impenetrable, someone else was apparently finding absolutely hilarious. Ha 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 ha. A woman had her back to Amamiya Rin, doubled over laughing at the screen. That person. Mamiya Yuka. There was, of course, no way to identify someone from behind, someone he'd had only brief contact with 20 years ago. He simply thought it through. 20 years ago, before the cardiac arrest, who was the last woman he'd had any contact with? Only Mamiya Yuka. Mamiya Yuka was wearing comfortable loungewear, a pumpkin-shaped cushion clutched tight to her chest, eyes fixed unblinking on the television screen. In sharp contrast to the cringe Amamiya Rin was experiencing, her shoulders shook with barely suppressed laughter. The corners of her mouth refused to stay down. Every time the two comedians landed another punchline, she burst out laughing right on cue, over and over without pause. So absorbed was she that she hadn't even noticed Amamiya Rin had woken up. Hey! Amamiya Rin tried to push himself upright, and was hit by a wave of profound, crushing weakness. He swayed sideways and caught himself against the wall. At the sound of his voice, Mamiya Yuka finally turned around, still laughing, her grin stretched wide and completely out of her control. Ha ha ha. Amamiya-kun, ha ha ha, you're finally awake, ha 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 ha. Seeing that he was up, she laughed harder than ever, rocking back and forth until the pumpkin cushion in her arms was being squeezed out of shape. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes and caught the lamplight, glittering like tiny sparks. Ms. Mamiya, something is wrong with you. Amamiya Rin's gaze sharpened. Mamiya Yuka's state was far too strange. Low laugh threshold or not, there was no earthly reason to still be laughing like this. I know, ha 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 ha. I can't stop, ha ha ha. Mamiya Yuka laughed until she was gasping, wiping her eyes mid-laugh, forcing out an explanation in broken, heaving fragments. Deja vu. Amamiya Rin's brow furrowed. This situation felt like something he'd seen or heard of before. A Junji Ito manga from his previous life. Too much time had passed, the details were hazy. But he could vaguely recall a certain chapter, one that featured something very much like this. Something that made a person laugh and laugh and laugh with no way to stop. Amamiya Rin braced himself against the wall, pushed to his feet, and crossed to the corner. He unzipped his backpack. Notebook, ballpoint pen, banknotes, sandpaper, everything seemed to be there. Not that he had the energy to count the money right now. He opened the notebook and flipped to the middle. What greeted him was row upon row of characters written in wild, sprawling Chinese script. Back then, to prevent himself from forgetting critical intelligence, he had recorded everything he could remember. To guard against prying eyes, he had written not just in Chinese characters, but in a deliberately scrambled, inverted order. Anyone who was not a native reader of Chinese would never make sense of a single line. Found it. He turned a few more pages, scanning each at speed. Amamiya Rin's eyes landed quickly on the passage that matched. Junji Ito manga, Ghost of Prime Time. Main characters, two comedians without a shred of natural talent. Though they possess no gift for comedy whatsoever, they possess akirio, living spirits. What is an akirio? In Japanese culture, an akirio is the soul of a living person. It is said that even while a person is still alive, their soul can detach from the body and drift freely through the world. This is said to occur most often in women consumed by intense jealousy or powerful, unresolved emotion, women who have long been fixated on something they cannot achieve in reality for one reason or another. Their souls leave their bodies in order to accomplish what the person cannot. Put simply, astral projection. And this phenomenon was precisely what manifested in those two comedians. But unlike an ordinary akirio, theirs could release multiple living spirits simultaneously. The upper limit was unknown, but it would be no less than 10 million. Underscore. Walnut-chan, winky face. New history, 0, Rathrout Yandra Emilia watches the projection. White heavy checkmark jump 40 chapters ahead of the public release. White heavy checkmark get access to special perks and news. Help smash these goals. 100 Power Stones equals +1 bonus chapter for everyone. P. Walnut-chan. Chapter 100, Kayako escapes. 1,446 words. In Ghost of Prime Time, the two comedians harass their audience through their akirio, living spirits, forcing helpless laughter from viewers, driving some to literally laugh themselves to death. Their popularity grew with every broadcast. Eventually, they earned a coveted slot in television's golden hours. Their akirio traveled through the airwaves, pouring into home after home. anyone who watched the program fell under their influence. This was the nature of Junji Ito's horror manga: no cultivation system, no power ceiling, and a casual willingness to deal in world-ending consequences. Strange worlds played by strange rules. Amamiya Rin set the notebook down and looked up at Mamiya Yuka, who was still laughing without any sign of stopping. For a long moment, he had no idea how to help her. According to the manga's logic, there should be an Akirio hovering somewhere near Mamiya Yuka right now, tickling her, physically compelling that helpless laughter. It was almost disarmingly mundane as supernatural threats went. About as grounded as Dio stopping time, and then manually carrying Boing Boing down a flight of stairs, one step at a time. But Amamiya Rin couldn't see Akirio. As a rule, traditional living spirits were visible to the naked eye, but Junji Ito's version clearly operated on different parameters. In Ghost of Prime Time, only the male protagonist possessed the yin-yang eyes needed to perceive them. If he couldn't even see it, what exactly was he supposed to do? Amamiya Rin's teeth pressed lightly against his lower lip, his expression caught between thought and frustration. Are you asking for our help? Just so we're clear, we have absolutely no ability to deal with spirit entities. I may be half demon, but I didn't inherit a single useful power from that biological father of mine. The voices of the Tomis surfaced in Amamiya Rin's mind, arriving with impeccable timing, and absolutely no solutions. They were just as helpless against souls as he was. There's also some bad news. We were asleep for too long. While we were under, Kayako pushed all of us out of the haunted house. I just tried to get back inside, I can't. She's sealed the house completely. The door won't budge. The plan to use our charm to keep Kayako occupied. That's dead. The night mist hung over the dark alley like gauze threaded with ice. Overhead, branches from the tree canopy wove together in a dense tangle, thick enough to swallow the moonlight whole. The air carried a cold that clung, and would not lift. More than 20 women, entirely bare, were scattered through the narrow lane, some standing, some seated, some leaning against the mottled brick walls with languid exhaustion, others crouched low in the shadows where the streetlight couldn't reach. Among them were Tomi instances whose bodies hadn't yet finished forming. One of them was little more than a massive growth of flesh, a tumorous mass, its surface pale and slick. At its crown, the outline of Tomi's features had begun to emerge, sparse black hair plastered against white skin, eyes half open and unfocused. There were many like her. Together, these incomplete Tomis had occupied Kayako's home, dying and dividing and regenerating endlessly under Kayako's onslaught, their supernatural allure driving her already unstable mind past the point of control. But the long dream had lasted more than 20 hours. And Seki Toshio had drawn Kayako's attention outward by luring other victims to the property. Together, those two factors had given Kayako just enough room to claw her way back to clarity. While the Tomis lay submerged in dreamless sleep, Kayako had seized the moment and cleared every last one of them out of her home. TSK. Bad enough that she's hideous, now she doesn't even have the nerve to kill us. Kawakami Tomi stood at the entrance to the courtyard, head tilted back to look at the house rising before her. In the second-floor bedroom window, a faint white silhouette was just barely visible. The corner of her mouth curved into a vicious smile. Her body began to change. The bones of her calves let out a faint series of cracks. Bone density surged through cellular division, and with it came growth, length and diameter both doubling in rapid succession. Her once slender legs thickened in seconds, becoming as substantial as the thighs of a grown man, layers of muscle fiber stacking and compressing beneath the skin like coiled cable under tension. Her thighs broadened outward. At the hip joints, new cartilage split and formed, reinforcing the skeleton's load-bearing capacity. Her torso rose in tandem, every muscle group writhing and proliferating as it expanded, forming a natural armor of living flesh. Her skin stretched to accommodate the change, thickening, toughening, as the outer layer divided into dense, overlapping keratin, hardening into a scale-like sheath of layered protection. Within seconds, the transformation was complete. Kawakami Tomi's slender frame had surged to nearly 3 meters in height. 2 additional heads grew from either side of her neck. 4 pale arms tore through her body, emerging at intervals from shoulder to waist, their surfaces ridged with solid, layered bony protrusions. This was the most powerful combat form currently within Kawakami Tomi's reach. She drew a long, deep breath and pushed her breathing technique to its absolute limit, her chest surging outward, her cheeks flushing dark with the effort. Boom! She drove both legs into the ground and launched herself forward. Her enormous body rocketed toward the iron gate like a cannonball. All 6 fists clenched simultaneously and swung, trailing a shearing roar through the air, slamming into the rusted iron bars with everything she had. The gate did not move. The moment her fists made contact, it was as though she had struck an invisible wall, elastic, unyielding, utterly solid. A deep, resonant impact shook through the alley. The shockwave blasted the surrounding dust into swirling clouds. But the iron gate itself didn't so much as shiver. Kawakami Tomi refused to accept it. She couldn't control her body's density yet, that much was true, but at this size, with her breathing technique at full output, she was generating enough raw force to flip a car. There was no rational reason a rusted iron gate should stop her. Save your energy. She doesn't want visitors, she's locked the door. From the shadows of the alley wall, another Tomi let out a contemptuous snort. Arms crossed over her chest, she let her gaze slide briefly over the massive azuriform Tomi before drifting up to the pale, white shape in the second-floor window. One more try. The enormous form rocked backward, gathered itself, and exploded upward, launching into the air with enough force to clear the gate entirely. But the moment she would have crossed over it, the invisible force returned. Like a wall of solid rubber, it caught her at the apex and flung her back. Kawakami Tomi staggered on landing, stumbling backward until she crashed into the wall behind her. What are we even supposed to do with a coward who just turtles up behind her wall? Forget it, forget it. Don't waste any more time here. Another Tomi, crouched low on the ground, wound a length of her black hair lazily around one finger and spoke without urgency. Heh. Technically, Kayako threw us out this time. We didn't leave voluntarily. Amamiya can't blame us for this one, can he? Whoever could have guessed that Kayako would turn out to be this pathetic? She was always this pathetic. This is a woman who once hid under someone's bed to eavesdrop on the person she had a crush on. We've always known she was that kind of coward, haven't we? Truly pitiful. The Tomis went back and forth at a leisurely pace, trading barbs, every word dripping with contempt. Up on the second floor the curtain shifted, barely, almost imperceptibly. The white silhouette remained exactly where it was. No response. But the temperature in the alley had dropped another few degrees with each mocking remark. The air grew thick and heavy, pressing in from all sides like something alive. No matter what the Tomis said, however, Kayako did not move. She had become, in the most literal sense, a turtle retreating into its shell. ________. Seek, Walnut-chan. New history, Re, 0, Rathrout Yandere Emilia watches the projection. White heavy checkmark read 40 chapters ahead of everyone else. White heavy checkmark get cool exclusive stuff and updates. Let's hit these goals. 100 Power Stones equals 1 extra chapter for the public. P. Walnut-chan. Chapter 101, Tomi Cockroach Theory. 1,541 words. Kayako was genuinely afraid now. The gap in power between them was undeniable. Even when Kawakami Tomi assumed her strongest form, she still couldn't shake Kayako's dominance, not even slightly. But cockroaches. To Kayako, Kawakami Tomi was, without question, a cockroach. Difficult to kill outright, breeding at a terrifying rate, trivially easy to crush, and yet the gore and the eggs that burst from each crushed body could never be fully cleaned away. They got under your skin. They were repulsive and they were inescapable. That was exactly what Kawakami Tomi was in Kayako's eyes. Something disgusting. Something that refused to go away. The women outside made a ruckus for a good while longer, but Kayako gave them nothing, no response, no reaction, not even a flicker of acknowledgement. Eventually, no one could muster the energy to keep pushing. So what do we do? What do we do? Don't ask something so spineless. Amamiya. He can sort himself out. It's not like we're going to volunteer to solve his problems for him. Thinking and commanding, that's his job. If he ends up dead at the hands of that ugly woman because he ran out of ideas, it just means his limits showed themselves. He. That's ice cold. The Tomis traded words with graceful smiles and languid ease, their voices carrying that characteristic contemptuous lilt. And yet, beneath it all, their eyes gave them away. There was something in the way they glanced inward, a quiet, unspoken expectation directed at Amamiya Rin. Fine. I'll figure something else out. Amamiya Rin's calm, measured voice resonated through the Tomi network, cutting through their performative deliberating. Stay where you are for now. Any of you still in Tokyo, get some clothes to the ones outside. You probably don't care, but standing around half-dressed on the street is going to draw the kind of attention we don't need. A few non-committal hums and lazy murmurs of acknowledgement drifted through the Tomi network in reply, reluctant acceptance of the arrangement. He closed the connection. Coming back to himself, Amamiya Rin redirected his attention to the immediate problem in front of him, Mamiya Yuka, still laughing without any sign of stopping. He studied her shoulders, trembling continuously with each helpless burst of laughter. His brow creased. The two comedians' obsession was becoming top-tier stars, primetime royalty. That meant they had no motive to kill their audience. Mamiya Yuka wasn't in danger of literally laughing herself to death, the way the family in the manga had been. But he couldn't let her keep going like this either. Something had to be done. Amamiya Rin closed his eyes. He drew a long, slow breath and guided his awareness downward, deeper, layer by layer, toward the quieter levels of his mind. Count. Follow. Stop. Contemplate. Return. Purify. The 6 gates of wondrous Dharma cycled through his inner world, and stray thoughts scattered like motes of dust swept aside by a clean wind. He entered a state of deep dhyana with practiced speed. His senses turned inward, folding against themselves. His perception of the outside world blurred and receded, and in that receding, something else was quietly amplified, an instinct that could not be named, or perhaps simply the 6th sense. Amamiya Rin slowly opened his eyes and looked at Mamiya Yuka. His gaze settled on the space just to her right. He saw nothing. But an instinct that defied any rational articulation told him, something was there. It was like the way a person sometimes feels, for no reason at all, that someone is standing behind them. Or the sensation of being watched from a direction that turns out to be empty. Or the groundless certainty, arriving without cause, that something is about to happen. That same feeling had taken hold of him now. Something was to Mamiya Yuka's right. Something that was making her laugh. The instinct had no evidence. And yet it was perfectly, crystallinely clear. Amamiya Rin's will locked onto that invisible presence. He pressed the fingers of his right hand flat together, edge forward like a blade. His left hand braced against the wall. He rose, swaying slightly, and walked toward Mamiya Yuka. Something is there. I will hit it. The fierce, unbroken self-suggestion narrowed his focus to a single point of pure intention. There was no second guessing. No hesitation. He simply decided and moved. His hand blade swept through the air in a clean, decisive diagonal slash, the full weight of his will driving it down toward the empty space to Mamiya Yuka's right. The air seemed to part around an invisible edge. His hand blade struck precisely into that void. No impact sound. No flash of light. No solid object to hit. But in the instant the blade passed through, Amamiya Rin felt something. Unmistakably. A sensation that was extraordinarily clear. It was like a sharp edge cutting through something invisible that was both tough and viscous, like jelly, or a current of water. A distinctly unpleasant resistance, sticky and clinging, that jolted through the nerves along his arm, and vanished in the same instant it arrived. Hic! Mamiya Yuka's laughter was severed as though someone had grabbed it by the throat. It cut off with jarring abruptness, leaving nothing behind but one loud, startled hiccup. The smile on her face lingered for a moment, frozen, and then melted into blank, bewildered vacancy. She touched her own cheek. She rubbed her own stomach. The gears weren't turning yet. She couldn't process how one casual wave of Amamiya Rin's hand had made that irrepressible, helpless urge to burst out laughing simply disappear. Amamiya Rin slowly drew his hand back and resettled himself onto the tatami. The tips of his fingers still carried a ghost of that strange, fleeting sensation. But the feeling in his chest, that absolute certainty that something was there, was gone. Completely. Without a trace. This is what mind over matter means. Amamiya Rin murmured to himself. Belief itself is a form of power. He had learned the theory of mind over matter from the abbot. He had watched Kawakami Tomi put that philosophy into practice with his own eyes, bending her own cellular division to the force of her will. But attempting it himself, manifesting the concept through his own strength, in his own hands, that was a first. How did you do that? That was incredible. Mamiya Yuka launched herself across the room, and knelt at the edge of the tatami, eyes fixed unblinking on Amamiya Rin's arm. Her dark, pearl-like eyes were practically sparkling. Not a trace of fear about what had just happened to her. Only excitement, the pure, guileless thrill of watching Amamiya Rin solve the problem with a single hand blade. This girl had an extraordinary capacity for fearlessness. Basic exorcism technique. Not much different from scattering salt. Amamiya Rin leaned back against the wall, letting it take his full weight, reducing the burden on his exhausted body. Salt. I tried that. Mamiya Yuka twisted around and flopped down onto her stomach, sweeping her hands across the floor, and only then did Amamiya Rin notice. There were quite a few white salt granules scattered across the tatami. She gathered them into a small pile, pinched up a little heap, and held it out toward him. Because your heart wasn't sincere enough. The moment the words were out, Amamiya Rin caught himself. That sounded exactly like something a street charlatan would say. He corrected course immediately. I know that sounds like a con, but if your will isn't firm, the salt won't work. It genuinely can't exorcise anything. Will not being firm. Higa-san said something similar. But what does it actually mean for your will to be firm? Mamiya Yuka tilted her head, brow furrowed with genuine puzzlement. Higa. The name caught Amamiya Rin's attention. It was familiar. In a horror film he'd seen in his previous life, the female protagonist and Japan's foremost exorcist had shared the surname Higa. The film had a novelization and a manga adaptation too. He'd tracked both down and read them. She's a psychic that a senior colleague at the publisher knows. A really cool, beautiful woman. Mamiya Yuka explained with eager enthusiasm. That might be someone I know of. But it doesn't matter. Amamiya Rin gave a faint nod. From Mamiya Yuka's description alone, he could tell, the Higa she was talking about and the Higa he knew of were one and the same. He didn't make a big deal of it. This world was plainly a convergence of countless Japanese horror works, all blended together. Nothing surprising about it. Nothing worth dwelling on. After all, the so-called three great ghost kings, put together, wouldn't even be enough for Hellstar Remina to swallow in a single bite. ______. Seek, Walnut-chan. New history, Re, 0, Rathrout Yandra Emilia watches the projection. White heavy checkmark read 40 chapters ahead of everyone else. White heavy checkmark get cool exclusive stuff and updates. Let's hit these goals. 100 Power Stones equals 1 extra chapter for the public. P. Walnut-chan. Chapter 102, Mamiya's Ideal. 1,566 words. Let's get back to the point, Ms. Mamiya. Would you mind telling me first, where exactly am I, and why am I here? Amamiya Rin steadied himself and turned to Mamiya Yuka with the more pressing question. Well, about that. Mamiya Yuka's expression turned peculiar. The look she was giving Amamiya Rin was exactly like the look someone gives a rare and exotic animal. A physically disabled man had suddenly transformed into a devastating swordsman. A vigorous, ferocious warrior had abruptly dropped dead. And then the dead man had inexplicably come back to life an hour later. Even a full day and night later, thinking back on any of it still struck Mamiya Yuka as utterly incomprehensible. Yesterday afternoon you suddenly dropped dead. Your bag had several million yen in it. I couldn't just leave it sitting there, and I couldn't hand it to the police without explaining everything. So I had no choice but to bring you back here. Mamiya Yuka carefully recounted the events of the previous day. After Amamiya Rin had come back to life, she'd tried to wake him, but he'd been sleeping so deeply that she hadn't dared use any drastic measures. Especially given that he'd just dropped dead. One look at those dark circles under his eyes had been enough to convince her. She'd simply let him sleep straight through from yesterday afternoon until tonight. Oh right, a few people came looking for you yesterday too. What a small world. As she said it, Mamiya Yuka leaned in a little closer, her voice carrying a bright, conspiratorial energy, the unmistakable thrill of someone who'd turned up a minor secret. The first person to call was Kazumi Junya. And here's the coincidence, my folklore professor from university, Kurosaki-sensei, is his older brother. What are the odds? Mamiya Yuka said it with undisguised delight. A folklore professor. Amamiya Rin's expression went a little strange, though his concern wasn't the shared connection between two acquaintances. It was the profession itself. A folklore scholar in a horror-themed world. Their mortality rate had to be somewhere north of 99%, didn't it? What did Kazumi Junya say? Amamiya Rin's reaction was so flat that Mamiya Yuka puffed out her cheeks in mild indignation. He asked about your safety. I wasn't entirely sure what to tell him about the two of you, and your wounds were healing way too fast to easily explain. So even though Kazumi is Kurosaki-sensei's younger brother, I kept the details vague. I just told him you were resting at my place. He didn't push for more, he just said to have you call him when you woke up, so he'd know you were okay. As for how she'd interrogated Kazumi Junya about Aizawa Yuma, until he'd been reduced to such a flustered wreck that he'd had no choice but to hang up just to escape her pestering, that part didn't need to be mentioned to Amamiya Rin. The second call was from Ms. Fujino Terumi, the national idol herself. Mamiya Yuka settled back into her spot and gave Amamiya Rin a small teasing smile. I genuinely didn't see that coming, Amamiya-kun. You and a national idol are actually friends. What a waste, I'm not a fan, and I'm certainly not a celebrity paparazzi. That connection you're carrying is completely wasted on me. Oh, and after Ms. Fujino Terumi asked how you were doing, she mentioned she had something else she wanted to talk to you about, but it didn't seem especially urgent. She just said if you have time, to give her a call. Anything else? Amamiya Rin gave a small nod and pressed on. And then there was a Dr. Kuroda. He introduced himself as your former attending physician. Same thing, just checking in, asked you to call when you had a chance to let him know you're all right. Too late tonight. I'll reach out to all of them tomorrow. Amamiya Rin gave a non-committal reply, his eyes nudging Mamiya Yuka to continue. Those were the 3 calls. After that, well, there's been this comedy duo lately that's absolutely blowing up right now. They even landed a primetime slot on TV. But there have been some very strange rumors going around. Apparently their stand-up routines aren't actually funny in the slightest, and yet every single audience member ends up laughing helplessly. I had a feeling there was something supernatural at work, so tonight I deliberately sat down and watched their program. Mamiya Yuka scratched the tip of her nose, let out a small, sheepish laugh, and said with an embarrassed grin. And then, well, you saw the rest yourself. Before I even knew what was happening, I'd fallen for it too. I'd strongly advise you to break this bad habit of yours. Amamiya Rin let out a long, quiet sigh and turned to Mamiya Yuka with a measured warning. Walk down dark roads long enough, and sooner or later you'll run into something you can't come back from. Keep this up and you're going to get yourself killed. He himself would have gladly fled to the ends of the earth to get away from curses and ghost stories, but Mamiya Yuka practically marched toward death every single day. Just these past 2 days alone, the Dissolution series, then the Primetime Ghost. Honestly, the fact that she'd survived this long in this world was something of a minor miracle. This is not a bad habit, thank you very much, it's my passion, my career, and my calling. Exploring urban legends and local folklore, uncovering the secrets hidden inside them, I've dedicated my entire life to this pursuit. Mamiya Yuka planted both hands firmly on her hips and thrust her chest out. Her face lit up with an expression that was equal parts wide-eyed innocence and iron-willed stubbornness. Too sweet, Amamiya Rin said. Sweeter than strawberry milk. He shook his head. But despite the words, he didn't keep pushing. For someone who carried genuine passion and unshakable conviction toward a legitimate purpose, someone who'd faced real danger and still hadn't wavered, one word of warning was enough. To keep repeating it would cross the line into an insult. This world might actually need people like paranormal journalists and folklore scholars, even if the mortality rate is far too high. All Amamiya Rin could offer now was a quiet blessing. And to do the same thing himself, step into danger head-on, for his own sake and for humanity's. Amamiya Rin pressed his fingers to his brow and looked around. The room was small. Beyond the tatami mat he'd been lying on and the small patch where Mamiya Yuka had been sitting to watch television, there was practically no open space left. A desk, assorted clutter, a television set, and camera equipment had claimed almost every corner. He pressed a hand against the wall and pushed himself to his feet, working through the stiffness still lingering in his limbs. Ms. Mamiya, how did you manage to sleep last night? Oh, that. I just laid out another tatami mat on the floor. Don't worry about it, Mamiya Yuka said, pointing behind herself with a breezy wave of her hand. I've been imposing on you for a couple of days now. Since I'm back on my feet, it's time for me to be on my way. A room this cramped, taking up the sleeping space of a woman he'd only just met and forcing her onto the floor. That wasn't something Amamiya Rin could bring himself to continue doing. Then let me walk you to the hospital. Mamiya Yuka made no move to stop him. After all, she was a young, single woman with her dignity intact. She couldn't exactly make a habit of keeping other men overnight. Thank you, but that won't be necessary. I'll stay at a hotel. A faint, bitter smile touched Amamiya Rin's face. Morita Hospital, Toto General Hospital, 2 hospitals had already suffered mass casualties after he'd checked in. As much as he hated accepting something as metaphysically neat as curses attracting curses, the facts were the facts. The more curses clung to him, the more he became a magnet for new ones. If he checked into another hospital now, he was afraid it would end up playing out the plot of infection. Better to stay at a hotel for a couple of days first, then find a proper place to rent. Huh? Are you sure that's okay? Your body, you genuinely don't need to get checked out. You literally dropped dead yesterday. Mamiya Yuka was both surprised and genuinely worried. She couldn't make sense of his decision at all. Don't worry about it. The cardiac arrest was just from overexertion. Proper rest is all I need, there's nothing medically wrong with me. I just need to recuperate. Amamiya Rin tucked his notebook into his bag, slung it over his shoulder, and made up his mind to leave. ______. Plus 40 ch, Walnut-chan. New history, re, 0, all my employees are naughty girls. White heavy checkmark read up to 40 chapters in advance, all stories. White heavy checkmark access exclusive posts and updates first. Let's achieve our community goals. 100 Power Stones equals plus 1 extra chapter for everybody. P. Walnut-chan. Chapter 103, Three Great Delicacies. 1,441 words. Realizing she had no hope of changing Amamiya Rin's mind, Mamiya Yuka stopped trying to dissuade him. I made a special trip to the hospital to retrieve these. The wooden sword has taken quite a bit of wear, but the cane is fine. She brought the cane and the sheathed wooden sword from the corner of the entryway, supported Amamiya Rin, and walked him all the way out of the apartment building. She flagged down a taxi for him along the way, and paid the fare herself. The taxi pulled slowly away from the base of the apartment building. Through the window, Amamiya Rin watched Mamiya Yuka's silhouette disappear into the entrance before he finally looked away and leaned back against the rear seat. The car threaded through the nighttime streets, neon lights streaming past the window like ribbons of liquid color, leaving trails of vivid light in their wake. Amamiya Rin closed his eyes. Drawing on his deep mastery of dhyana, he entered the void, suspending all thought and movement, reducing the drain on both his body and mind to the barest minimum. Easy as he'd made it sound talking to Mamiya Yuka, the truth was that his situation was worse than it had ever been. The exhaustion that had already killed him once hadn't dissipated like morning fog after a full day and night of rest. Instead, it had compounded, layering on top of the 20 years of accumulated strain the long dream had pressed into his body. Doing the math, the shape of it was clear. If he didn't find a way to normalize his sleep, he had at most another day and a night before his body would simply give out again. My lifespan, barely 2 months left, Amamiya Rin murmured to himself. An extinction-level apology demon lurked just beyond his sight, watching and waiting. Kayako, a being with the potential to end the world, could come for him at any moment. And Kawakami Tomi's mind was growing stronger by the day. But the greatest threat to his life right now was the long dream. He had lost count of how many times he'd entered the dream today alone. All he knew was that barely a month had passed since his transmigration to this world, and yet the time accumulated inside the dream world had already stretched to 20 years. Within 2 months, his body would crumble to ash. There was only one solution: find the Sandman's curse within those 2 months, and use his dream self to reset his condition. A little over half an hour later, the taxi arrived safely in the city center. He stepped out. The evening breeze hit him immediately, laden with the enticing smell of food, and the particular noise and energy of the city at night. Not far off stood a brightly lit business hotel. On the other side stretched a long street packed with restaurants. A budget hotel near somewhere to eat. That had been the only condition Amamiya Rin had given when he'd gotten into the cab. No specific destination, just the parameters. The driver had delivered. Having gone a full day and night without food, his stomach had begun voicing its grievances. Amamiya Rin gripped his cane, shouldered his bag and sword case, and headed briskly toward the restaurant street. The long strip was alive with noise, neon signs blinking in cascades of color, steam billowing from ramen shop doorways, the raucous energy of izakayas spilling out onto the pavement, the rich, fatty char of yakiniku grills threading through it all. Every smell conspired to sharpen his hunger. Amamiya Rin quickened his pace and settled on an izakaya that looked reasonably clean, with a comfortable number of customers, not too packed, not too desolate. The shop was small. Warm amber light leaked through the gaps in the curtained doorway, carrying with it the comfortable, lived-in warmth of an ordinary human place. He pushed through the curtain. The warm air and the smell of food enveloped him at once. Amamiya Rin took a seat near the corner and carefully set his cane and sword case against the wall beside him. "Welcome," called the aproned owner, who was also evidently the chef, from behind the open kitchen counter, warm and unhurried. "What can I get you?" "Tonkatsu ramen, pan-fried gyoza, cocktail sausages and tempura." Amir Rin had glanced over the menu and ordered generously. "Just you?" the owner asked, blinking in mild surprise. "I have a big appetite," Amamiya Rin replied with a slight smile. After a full day and night without eating, he could have put away anything. If he'd spotted an all-you-can-eat buffet nearby, he might well have gone purely to get his money's worth. The owner nodded and asked, "Anything to drink?" Amamiya Rin was about to shake his head, when a nearby customer spoke up first. "Hey, friend, try the Tomi brew." The voice came from a flushed, visibly tipsy middle-aged man leaning one arm on the table, holding a ceramic bottle between two fingers of his right hand, giving it a lazy waggle in Amamiya Rin's direction. "It only just went on sale recently. The taste is something else. I've never had sake this good in my life. One sip and I guarantee you won't regret it." "Tomi brew?" Amir Rin's eye twitched as he stared at the ceramic bottle. "Yeah, must be from some place called Tomi or something." The drunk man gave a cheerful laugh. "In a manner of speaking, yes. That's not entirely wrong," Amamiya Rin said. He turned his head away, unable to look directly at the bottle, and noticed that several of the other customers had already purchased the so-called Tomi brew. Sake brewed from Tomi's own flesh. Already being sold on a large scale. Amamiya Rin didn't even know what expression to make. In Junji Ito's manga, someone really had taken Tomi's dismembered remains and brewed them into sake, and by the end of the story, had expressed clear intentions to sell it. But still. "If you don't believe me, I'll pour you a cup." The drunk middle-aged man was still enthusiastically pushing the Tomi brew his way. "Thank you, but no. My health isn't great, I can't drink alcohol." Amamiya Rin's gaze drifted evasively as he offered a polite decline. "Ah? What a shame." The middle-aged man clicked his tongue, but didn't press further. He poured himself another cup of the clear liquid, raised it to his nose, and inhaled slowly with an expression of pure, unguarded bliss, then tipped it back in one long swallow. Amamiya Rin made no move to stop him. There was no point. Who knew how many people had already drunk it? All he could do now was pray that those ceramic bottles had been fully purged of Tomi's cells. "If only I had some meat from Daruma Yakiniku to go with this," another customer said wistfully. "That place is honestly the only restaurant worthy of sake this good." "I can hear you, you know," the owner called out dryly from behind the counter, not looking up from the ramen he was preparing for Amamiya Rin. "Ha! You're not a proper yakiniku restaurant, why would you even care?" The customer burst out laughing and poured himself a cup of the sake as well. "Daruma Yakiniku," said a middle-aged man in sunglasses and a suit seated nearby, his tone calm and measured. "Could you tell me more about it?" "It's a yakiniku place in Shizuoka Prefecture. The shop itself is absolutely filthy, grease literally everywhere, but the taste is unbelievable. If you ever find yourself in Shizuoka, you have to go at least once," the first customer enthused. "I'll make sure of it," the sunglasses man said with a brief, composed nod. The words were few, but the anticipation behind them was unmistakable. Amamiya Rin listened in silence, something twisting unpleasantly in his stomach. Shizuoka Prefecture. Mount Fuji is in Shizuoka. Which means, that's the human flesh yakiniku restaurant. Add a serving of tree honey, the kind that would get you beaten to death just for touching it, and you'd have the complete set, Junji Ito's 3 signature dishes. Entree. Drink. Dessert. If a single person somehow managed to consume all 3 in one lifetime, what a spectacular and thoroughly deserved misfortune that would be. _________. Walnut-chan, winky face. New history, all my employees are naughty girls. Help smash these goals. 100 power stones equals +1 bonus chapter for everyone. Chapter 104, Fine Wine, How Can One Not Drink It? 1521 words. Is it really that good? A thought from one of the Tomis rippled through the Tomi network, carrying with it a surge of intense curiosity. Grilled meat, sake, honey, I want some. Unlike Amamiya Rin's deep-seated aversion, Kawakami Tomi had absolutely no qualms about consuming her own imposters. Especially now that she had picked up from Amamiya Rin's thoughts the information that Kawakami Tomi tasted delicious, the lot of them were growing positively eager to try. Absolutely not. Amamiya Rin's thoughts bristled with resistance. 2 of those 3 counted as cannibalism, the honey was the only exception. It's like biting your nails. Eating something that came off your own body is the same as chewing your own fingernails. Who hasn't nibbled their own fingernails before? Absolutely not. I am exercising my right of absolute veto. I refuse. Amamiya Rin's thoughts fired back with one enormous red X, hee hee. Refusing doesn't help. I'm doing it anyway. Kawakami Tomi's capacity for decisive action was remarkable. Frighteningly remarkable. Back at the izakaya, the ramen Amamiya Rin had ordered arrived at the table, steaming hot, fragrant, and ready. He picked up his chopsticks. Before he had even taken a single bite, a clean, lightly sweet sensation spread across the tip of his tongue, followed by the rich, mellow warmth of sake. The flavor was more refreshing than any drink he had ever tasted, though it was not his own experience. It had synced directly through the Tomi network. Across the city, at an upscale restaurant. Kawakami Tomi sat alone by a window table, dressed in a black evening gown. Before her were several exquisitely arranged small dishes, and a glass of crystalline liquid that caught the light and rippled gently. She lifted her wine glass. A mischievous smile played at the corners of her lips as she took a slow, deliberate sip. The taste hit Kawakami Tomi's senses like a force of nature. No, taste was not the right word. Bewitching came far closer. The Tomi brew carried within it a quality impossible to put into words, as though Kawakami Tomi's own supernatural allure had been distilled and poured into the liquid itself, producing even a faint hallucinogenic effect. The corners of Kawakami Tomi's eyes curved upward. That bewitching, otherworldly face of hers bloomed into a seductive, languid smile. Back at the izakaya, Amamiya Rin's chopsticks froze in midair. How does it taste? Delicious, isn't it? Ha. As expected of me. I'm going to buy a bottle tomorrow. Wait, why are we paying money for something that came from ourselves? Oh, you're right. Let's find out which poor soul they used to brew this, then take over the distillery. The Tomi's thoughts streamed through Amamiya Rin's mind one after another. Not a single one of them treated the act of drinking the Tomi brew as anything remotely significant. As I suspected. I cannot afford to relax around all of you for even a minute. Amamiya Rin pressed his index and middle fingers together against the center of his brow and rubbed in a slow, gentle circle. The expression on his face defied easy description. His instinct was to retch, but he had not actually drunk anything. He had simply been the unwilling recipient of a Tomi sharing the experience of what her own body tasted like. The grimace plastered on his face caught the attention of the owner, who was bringing over the pan-fried gyoza. The man looked visibly put off and asked, "Something wrong, sir?" Not a fan of the ramen smell. He had not even touched his food yet, and already he looked like that. It was, frankly, a little aggravating to witness. What's with that face? Do I really taste that awful? At the same moment, Kawakami Tomi's voice came through the network, teasing, playful, unhurried. No, the food looks wonderful, Amamiya Rin said, drawing a slow, measured breath. I just thought of something unpleasant. He composed himself, let his eyelids sink closed, pressed his fingertips gently to his brow before releasing them, and formed a simple dhyana mudra. Form is not separate from emptiness, emptiness is not separate from form. Form is itself emptiness, emptiness is itself form. Sensation, perception, volition, and consciousness, all are the same. The cadence of the Heart Sutra flowed slowly through his sea of consciousness. The uncanny sweetness of the Tomi brew, its bewitching, lingering aftertaste, all of it began to dissolve before the rising tide of meditative clarity. The discomfort of having perceived the taste of Tomi's flesh was, in the end, nothing but a manifestation of form, a phantom woven from sensation and attachment. Flesh, blood, skin, and bone are all temporary convergences of cause and condition, possessing neither permanence nor true substance. That he could still feel unsettled by this at all revealed the limit of his cultivation. He had not yet truly attained the state of dwelling in no sign, no abiding. He could not yet genuinely perceive the human body as an empty assemblage of the four great elements, the medical knowledge the Tomis had accumulated through their studies in the dream world made it impossible for him to regard the body with a purely idealist eye. Yet beneath Amamiya Rin's meditative observation, the discomfort and nausea arising from within him gradually dissolved. Flesh and blood are not real, bodily fluids are not substantial, they are nothing but projections of deluded attachment. The warm amber light of the izakaya fell across Amamiya Rin's face, smoothing the crease from between his brows, softening the cast of his features. Boring men. Men who are this serious never attract women, you know. Sigh. If it weren't for us, it'd be hard to imagine you ever finding a soulmate in this lifetime. Since Rinkuin doesn't seem to care about that anyway, I'll just go buy a bottle myself. Amamiya Rin had acted too decisively, dissolving his inner discomfort through his mastery of Diana, and the Tomis, who had simply wanted to tease him, were left thoroughly disappointed. Reluctant to concede, they made a few more half-hearted attempts to disturb his composure. Drinking is prohibited. Amamiya Rin lifted a chopstick full of ramen to his mouth and ate, his expression perfectly calm. The thought that followed carried the quiet, unassailable authority of a standing order. Your drunkenness transfers to me as well. If you would rather not spend another few decades trapped in the dream world, stop engaging in conduct that harms others without benefiting yourselves. The Tomi network flooded with waves of disappointed thoughts, not because Amamiya Rin had banned drinking, but because his prohibition had not come from any genuine aversion to the Tomi brew itself. Which meant they had absolutely no way of using it to get a rise out of him. Soon, the rest of Amamiya Rin's order arrived. The piping hot ramen sat in a rich, milky white broth, the pan-fried gyoza were golden and crackling crisp, the cocktail sausages gleamed with a slick of oil, the tempura had been fried to a light, perfect crunch. The hunger gnawing at his stomach swept every remaining distraction from Amamiya Rin's mind. He picked up his chopsticks and gave himself over entirely to eating. When the last of the food was gone, he paid, took up his cane, and walked out of the restaurant. The cool night breeze brushed away the warm, lingering smell of the izakaya, and sharpened his thoughts a little. He walked along the street to the nearby business hotel and checked in. He stepped into a narrow but clean single room, set his backpack and sword case beside the nightstand, leaned his cane against the wall, and then let himself drop heavily onto the bed. He was exhausted. Profoundly, bone-deep exhausted. Every cell in his body was screaming for sleep, but Amamiya Rin knew, with absolute certainty, that he could not allow it. He closed his eyes, relaxed his body completely, let his consciousness sink down into Diana, and reduced his bodily functions to the barest minimum, conserving both physical and mental energy. Outside the window, the city's neon signs flickered and pulsed. Inside the room, there was absolute silence. Amamiya Rin's breathing became nearly imperceptible, only the slowest, faintest rise and fall of his chest proved he was still alive. Outside, the sky shifted from deep black to pale gray, then gradually brightened. Amamiya Rin held that new tortoise-breath state of Diana, all the way through the night, until brilliant morning sunlight pierced through the gap in the curtains and fell against his eyelids, and only then did he slowly open his eyes. The exhaustion in his body had not lifted in the slightest. If anything, it had settled overnight, growing heavier. His mind was slightly foggy, but not as severe as the day before yesterday. He could still think clearly. ________. Wentmore, Walnut-chan. New history, all my employees are naughty girls. Let's reach these milestones together. 100 Power Stones equals +1 free chapter for all readers. Chapter 105, Fujino's Unease. 1,429 words. Amamiya Rin forced himself upright and leaned against the headboard. His mind, which had been idling through the night, finally began to turn over. Starting today, I can't stay in the hospital anymore. So what's next? He murmured to himself. There was simply too much to do, so much that he couldn't even arrange it all into a clean, logical order. Just for today, should he first check in with Kazumi Junya, Fujino Terumi, and Dr. Kuroda. Let them know he was still alive. Then take control of the Tomy host and deal with the flesh-colored monster. After that, gather the parts and materials, find a workshop and a chemistry lab, and start manufacturing high-lethality weapons. And he still needed to sharpen his hypnosis skills, track down that master who could apparently hypnotize even ghosts. Right, he'd have to pay a visit to the pressure gym as well. His physical condition was far too poor. Unlike Tomy, he couldn't control his body through division. And with curses drawn to one another by nature, he needed to improve his physical capabilities as quickly as possible. Aizawa Tomy and the other Tomys also needed attention. He could use Fujino Terumi's connections in the entertainment industry to track down those two female comedy duo members. There's just too much to deal with. Just thinking about it all left Amamiya Rin feeling drained, body and soul. This was not something one person could handle alone. Especially when it came to the strange curses. The heavy ones, the police history compilation office was useless there. Official organizations prioritized stability. To avoid making things worse, they never dared to act rashly. The weak ones, he could handle those himself, like a stress-relieving pastime. This can't keep going on. We have to pick up the pace. The moment the thought crossed his mind, the Tomy network erupted with a flood of question marks. The bomb configurations and weapons manufacturing, I'm too slow on my own, and there are too many places to run to. Who's at a university? Use the school's equipment to handle that portion of the work for me. Any Tomy willing to take this on, within 1 month, I won't force a body sync on you. After a brief silence, a Tomy immediately accepted the request. I'll do it. The school I'm enrolled in has an outstanding science and engineering department. We're not lacking for equipment. Second item, boxing, judo, 8 extremities fist, or marksmanship and swordsmanship if you prefer. Go learn them. I don't think I even need to force this one. If you truly want to kill the apology demon, you already know what you need to do. Amamiya Rin's meaning was simple. Killing the apology demon was not his goal alone. Then the effort of growing stronger for that purpose shouldn't fall on him alone, either. Combat skills should fall under the second condition negotiated from the start. The Tomys would acquire a surface-level understanding through practice, and then Amamiya Rin would enter the dream world to refine them to mastery. Oh ho 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 ho. Don't you dare underestimate me. Martial arts training. Let me show you just what I'm made of. Kawakami Tomy let out her trademark arrogant 3-beat queen's laugh. Surprisingly, not a single one of them showed the slightest resistance or reluctance toward learning combat techniques. That was because, in the dream world, Amamiya Rin had already talked it through with them. The pinnacle of technique capable of slaying a demon, that was not a feat Amamiya Rin could achieve through his own efforts alone. As long as the apology demon could be ground to dust and scattered to the wind, the Tomys didn't mind spending some time learning to fight. What do you mean, what you're made of? Are you some kind of grit bro? Amamiya Rin was momentarily speechless. Kawakami Tomy had always been a little unhinged, but under the influence of his own thought patterns, she somehow seemed even more unhinged than before. Forget it. The point is, as long as none of you have forgotten the plan we laid out in the dream, everything proceeds as originally planned. Cell biology, molecular biology, developmental biology, neurobiology, bioengineering. To fully unlock their own potential, the Tomys would need to pursue advanced study across all of these disciplines. These were things agreed upon long ago in the dream world. Since the Tomys hadn't forgotten them despite the time that had passed, naturally they showed no sign of questioning any of it now. With everyone's tasks mapped out, Amamiya Rin reached for his phone on the nightstand. The screen read just past 9 in the morning. Missed call and message notifications were popping up one after another. Kazumi Junya, Dr. Kuroda, Fujino Terumi. Strangely, there was nothing from the woman who had tipped him off about the serial murder case. They had clearly arranged to meet yesterday afternoon. He hadn't shown up, and yet she hadn't called to ask why. Amamiya Rin felt curious and faintly uneasy. Surely that woman hadn't already been killed by the murderer. Worry was worry, but there was no way to reach her. He had no choice but to call Dr. Kuroda first and check in. After ending the call with Dr. Kuroda, Amamiya Rin dialed Fujino Terumi's number as well, giving her a brief reassurance that he was fine. There's one more thing. Just as Amamiya Rin was about to hang up and contact Kazumi Junya, Fujino Terumi's voice came through, hesitant, unsettled. These past 2 days, something just hasn't felt right. Like there's something watching me from the shadows. Not like a paparazzi, something far more hair-raising than that. Do you think it could be the vampire we ran into last time? Or am I just being oversensitive? Imagining things? Whether it's your imagination or not, treat it as real and stay on guard. Safety first, Amamiya Rin said. His fingers tightened around the phone, his expression going still. If nothing unexpected had happened, Fujino Terumi's feeling was almost certainly not her imagination. He still remembered the last unknown call he'd received. The woman on the other end had told him the vampire was about to strike again. As for the vampire situation, I already have a lead. It'll be resolved by today at the latest. If he didn't receive another unknown call by noon today, he'd have no choice but to report it to Kazumi Junya. Though without any concrete evidence, reporting that a top idol singer was the perpetrator behind a serial murder case, even Kazumi Junya and his colleagues wouldn't be able to act on that. Based on their previous calls, he had at least some understanding of the police history compilation office by now. That department seemed to be little more than an archive room in practice, nothing like the special divisions in anime or novels with their exclusive privileges and sweeping authority. After reminding Fujino Terumi to stay safe, Amamiya Rin ended the call and dialed Kazumi Junya's number. Amamiya-kun. The line connected, and a slightly rushed voice came through. Kazumi Junya was clearly eager to confirm who was calling. It's me, Amamiya Rin answered. Phew. How are you? What happened yesterday afternoon? Hearing Amamiya Rin's voice, Kazumi Junya let out a breath of relief, and his tone lightened. I'm all right for now. As for what happened, I think I might just have a paranormal constitution, a magnet for strange incidents. The police should have already investigated what went down at the hospital, right? Amamiya Rin kept it brief and to the point, a few short sentences to sum up the situation. A paranormal constitution, you know, that might actually be true. The Tomi incident, the grudge incident, the dissolution incident, all within 1 month. Running into that many major events is simply unheard of. On the other end of the line, Kazumi Junya reflected on it and couldn't help but marvel. For an ordinary person, encountering even one such incident in a lifetime was extraordinarily rare, and even then, it typically meant either death or madness. Yet Amamiya Rin had survived 3 incidents back to back. Someone that indestructible, Kazumi Junya had never met a second person like him. _______. He. Walnut-chan for more chapters. New history, all my employees are naughty girls. Help us reach these goals. 100 Power Stones equals +1 universal bonus chapter. Chapter 106, Establishment. But I refuse. 1,469 words. The situation at the hospital has been fully investigated by the police. Thanks to the information you provided at the time, all officers dispatched to the scene were equipped with noise-canceling headsets. Unfortunately, while there were no police casualties, the civilian victims of this incident. Kazumi Junya trailed off. The civilian death toll was classified, not something he was permitted to disclose. Even so, Amamiya Rin already knew. The number of deaths this time around was almost certainly not less than 3 digits. He observed a moment of silence for the innocent dead, then pressed Kazumi Junya, and after that. How did the police handle the aftermath? After that, the police successfully apprehended Aizawa Yuma, and had him remanded to prison. The grief in Kazumi's voice was threaded through with pride and something like relief, the unmistakable exhale of a man who had set down a heavy burden. There's no evidence that could convict Aizawa Yuma in a court of law, but he will never, ever leave that prison. It's not that simple. I'd strongly recommend the police prepare to roll out preventive countermeasures on a broad scale. Amamiya Rin said it quietly, without inflection. He did not share Kazumi Junya's optimism. Aizawa Yuma alone was easy enough to deal with, a long-range sniper shot, one bullet, problem solved. The real problem was the evil electromagnetic waves demon lurking behind him. The evil electromagnetic waves demon had never been depicted in the manga as having a means of killing directly, but it did have the ability to possess human hosts. If the demon had been a blunt instrument, things might have been manageable. Instead, it excelled at conspiracy and long-game scheming, layer upon layer of interlocking contingencies, and had ultimately engineered the complete destruction of Japan. Not just Japan, either, any other country that attempted to investigate the cause of Japan's collapse was equally doomed. As Amamiya Rin saw it, the demon would either possess some heavyweight figure in the political world and arrange Aizawa Yuma's release, or let Aizawa Yuma die and revive him somewhere else, or simply select a different apostle to take his place. The possibilities were too numerous to count. After all, this demon was truly capable of dictating the life and death of human beings. Don't worry. Aizawa Yuma has caused no fewer than 4 digits worth of casualties by now. Every aspect of his containment will be maintained at the highest possible security level, nothing will go wrong. Kazumi Junya made the assurance with full confidence. I hope you're right. Amamiya Rin said it with his mouth. He did not believe a word of it in his heart. He rubbed at his throbbing temples and remembered the question of the reward money he had raised with Kazumi Junya last time. He brought it up directly. By the way, since my information turned out to be this useful, is there a reward? Of course. Inspector Indu already filed the paperwork and got it approved for you. 1 million yen in total, it was transferred to your bank account yesterday. There was a trace of a smile in Kazumi Junya's voice, and Amamiya Rin's eyes lit up in answer. 1 million yen was a meaningful sum, even by his standards. Added to the 2-odd million he already had in savings, he'd look into buying a jeep for getting around. Amamiya Rin turned it over in his mind. Setting aside the inconvenience of his leg, any time he needed to travel any real distance he would need a vehicle, and anyone who knew Japan knew what taxi fares were like. On top of that, his future was going to involve a lot of moving around. A jeep's off-road capability was excellent, it was durable and built to take punishment, it could handle all manner of difficult terrain, and the interior was spacious enough to sleep in at a pinch. A reasonably priced jeep in the 2 million range was exactly what he needed. There's one more thing, Officer Kazumi. I have an imposition I'd like to ask of you. Having mapped out his finances, Amamiya Rin pressed the advantage while he had it and put a request to Kazumi Junya. An imposition. Go ahead. Kazumi Junya answered without hesitation. He couldn't imagine Amamiya Rin making any request that crossed a legal line. As long as it wasn't illegal, given the contribution Amamiya Rin had made, he was willing to help with almost anything, no matter how difficult. I want access to the files on paranormal incidents held in the police history compilation office. Amamiya Rin stated his purpose without preamble. What? Kazumi Junya's sharp intake of breath was audible. He had just been thinking that he'd help with anything that didn't break the law, and Amamiya Rin had immediately turned around and hit him with something that did exactly that. I mentioned it to you before, didn't I? I seem to have a constitution that attracts the paranormal. I keep finding myself caught up in dangerous supernatural incidents. I want to use your files to deepen my understanding of these events, and improve my chances of surviving the next one. Amamiya Rin laid it out calmly. He wasn't lying. He just wasn't giving the complete reason. Junji Ito's horror manga rarely filled in all the details, time, place, people involved. And even when it did, he couldn't hold on to specifics like that from a past life. If he wanted to fully leverage the advantage his memories gave him, the police history compilation office's files were indispensable. He needed the documented details to flesh out the rough story outlines in his memory. You understand the issue, I'm sure. Police files are covered by confidentiality regulations. Even files about strange and supernatural things aren't in the same category as ordinary case files, but still. Kazumi Junya hesitated, unwilling to commit to Amamiya Rin's request. No matter how bizarre or outlandish the contents of the Police History Compilation Office's files might be, they were still classified documents subject to confidentiality regulations. There was simply no way to allow unauthorized personnel to review them. Do you want to become a police officer? At that moment, the voice coming through the phone shifted, Kazumi Junya's male voice replaced by a voice that was at once familiar and unfamiliar, a woman's. Officer Indu. Amamiya Rin recognized the owner of the voice at once. I've seen the hospital security footage. Your combat ability is impressive. Once you've recovered, even Kogure probably couldn't take you in a fight. And with that paranormal constitution of yours on top of that, you're a better fit for our police history compilation office than Kazumi is. So, are you interested? I can open a fast track for you. If you want to come on board, we can handle the paperwork today. Indu Ranko spoke with that peculiar Osaka drawl of hers. Her delivery was unhurried and lazy-sounding, but Amamiya Rin heard the seriousness underneath it. It was clear that Indu Ranko thought highly of him. His dhyana cultivation rendered him immune to psychic contamination. His exceptional combat skills meant that at minimum he could run. And most importantly, the nature of his paranormal constitution. For most officers, joining the Police History Compilation Office was an extraordinarily dangerous posting. For Amamiya Rin, it would actually function as a form of protection. Become a police officer. Amamiya Rin sat with the thought in silence for a moment. Going by Indu Ranko's attitude, joining the Police History Compilation Office would get him access to the paranormal files, and on top of that, he'd have a proper salary and an official position. Dealing with world-ending curses would also be more convenient with the backing of official authority. On the surface, there was nothing but upside. But I decline. Oh? And why is that? Indu Ranko's tone didn't waver, as though she were asking the question purely out of casual curiosity. I don't like being tied down. That was the most basic reason. Amamiya Rin was destined to be constantly on the move. He couldn't stay in Tokyo indefinitely. The more important reason, however, was that Amamiya Rin could not bring himself to trust the Japanese government. Not only because the evil electromagnetic waves demon could possess a high-ranking political official at any moment, but also because, barring any unforeseen developments, the political world of Japan, the people who truly controlled this country, were all ancient, undying beings who had been alive for centuries. _______. Walnut-chan in P for more. New history, all my employees are naughty girls. Help us unlock these community rewards. 100 Power Stones equals +1 bonus chapter for everyone. Chapter 107, Assistant. 1417 words. It was a Junji Ito manga, The Sword of the Soul Returner. The protagonist was a soul returner who wielded a cursed blade, capable of absorbing the life force drifting from humans and animals and storing it within his body, then bestowing it upon others through his sword. This soul returner served those in power. On a whim, he had granted a dying politician over 100 additional years of life. He was not the first to do this. Nor was he the first soul returner. How many of those undying relics lurked within Japan's political world, Amamiya Rin had no idea. What he did know was this: a bad end in old age was an extraordinarily common fate for those who held power. And a politician who had been alive since 100 years ago was someone utterly beyond trusting. The biological weapon in Gyo, it was entirely possible that creatures like them had been the ones to order its development. You don't like being tied down. Indu Ranko's tone shifted into something hard to read. Who in this world could live without being tied down? Even working somewhere else came with its own rules and constraints. What Amamiya Rin had said was less a reason and more an excuse. All right, not wanting to be tied down is one reason. The other is that there's no future in it. Without even a university degree, Officer Kazumi's current ceiling might well be my starting point. Amamiya Rin offered another reason. Kazumi Junya had made inspector rank at such a young age, barring some unforeseen circumstance. He had almost certainly graduated from Tokyo University and entered the force already ranked as inspector. That kind of fast-track elite. The so-called Gold Watch Brigade from Detective Conan was exactly that sort. An ordinary cop grinding away for a lifetime might end up at the level of Inspector Magyar, and nothing more. If it's allowed, I'd prefer to join the force after I've finished university. Until then, Superintendent Indu, I've heard that for investigations into organized crime or terrorism, the police can enter confidential agreements with specific civilians under the Act on the Protection of Specially Designated Secrets, in exchange for intelligence support. Does the Police History Compilation Office have any openings for civilian contributors? If so, I'd like to serve temporarily as an off-roster associate. Amamiya Rin had thought of an arrangement that gave both sides a graceful way out. A civilian contributor, something like a police informant, much like Haneda Hiroshi in the Detective Conan film Zero the Enforcer. A contributor. The Police History Compilation Office is hardly the Criminal Investigations Division. Silence stretched across the line for a few seconds. Then came a low, indecipherable laugh. Whether Induranko actually believed that Amamiya Rin intended to join after graduating, that was anyone's guess. But she accepted the explanation. That said, arranging a contributor slot for you isn't any real trouble. Think of it as getting you acclimated to the compilation office's work ahead of schedule. Thank you, Superintendent Indu. A quiet swell of relief rose in Amamiya Rin's chest. He thanked her immediately. With an official standing in the compilation office and access to its files, his plans would be considerably easier to carry out. Don't thank me, Induranko said, her voice languid and unhurried. A contributor slot in the compilation office is no cushy posting, no identity, no staff registration, no salary. Just investigation incentive bonuses and mortal danger. Besides you, I doubt there's another fool willing to take it on. Amamiya Rin only smiled and said nothing. After that, Induranko had little more to add. She told him the paperwork and agreements would take a few days, asked him to wait patiently for notification, and ended the call. With that intelligence bottleneck cleared, the weight on Amamiya Rin's mind eased somewhat. He turned, got out of bed, gathered his personal belongings, and left the hotel. He found a breakfast shop serving Chinese cuisine nearby and ordered a bowl of wonton noodles. He had barely picked up his chopsticks when a familiar figure invited herself over, sitting down directly across from him without a word of warning. Kawakami Tomi. Today she wore a cream-white knit sweater and a plaid mini-skirt. Her black hair fell like a waterfall, and her striking face drew repeated sideways glances from the other diners at nearby tables. Had she refreshed the apology demon's curse by disfiguring herself? Amamiya Rin wasn't certain. The apology demon's attack was a form of cognitive interference, it was hard to say for sure. He would have to observe over the next few days. If no one attacked Tomi, if no one hacked her to pieces, within that window, it would confirm that ordinary disfigurement wasn't enough to reset the status. Humph. Absolutely no class. Eating cheap commoner food first thing in the morning. Kawakami Tomi glanced at his plain bowl of noodles, making no effort to conceal the contempt in her voice. My wallet isn't equipped to handle your caviar and foie gras. Without looking up, Amamiya Rin slurped a mouthful of noodles. The flavor was, as expected, a localized adaptation of the original but passable. Besides, can you actually tell the difference between those luxury items and ordinary food? Because I certainly can't. Amamiya Rin was fairly confident Tomi couldn't either. Her fondness for caviar and foie gras existed simply because they were expensive enough and sufficiently famous. Low taste is your problem, not mine. Tomi propped her chin on one hand, twirling a lock of hair around a slender finger, her red lips curving into a mocking arc. Only the finest cuisine is worthy of us. You really ought to elevate your standards. Practicality suits me better. Amamiya Rin set down his chopsticks, reached into his backpack, and produced a fat, well-stuffed wallet, sliding it across the table toward Tomi. Tomi opened it and looked inside. A thick sheaf of 10,000 yen notes. Living expenses, operating funds, materials costs, this is everything I can spare. 1.5 million yen. Beyond the cost of materials for weapon production, the rest was living expenses for the several dozen newly manifested Tomis. They had arrived with nothing on them, not a single coin. If Amamiya Rin didn't provide for them, heaven only knew what they might get up to. Don't worry. Some of the counterfeits have already headed to the distillery. They should arrive this afternoon. Those people brewed liquor from us, they'd better be prepared for the victims to come knocking. Kawakami Tomi took the wallet without ceremony, the corner of her mouth lifting into a bewitching, dangerous curve. Victims. But who exactly is the victim here? Amamiya Rin massaged the bridge of his nose. The Tomis who had been dismembered and fermented into liquor. Or the distillery manager, driven to madness by Tomi's allure, who had ultimately committed acts too horrifying to name. This was an accounting that could never be properly settled. Don't be so hard on us. Isn't it perfectly obvious who the victim is? Kawakami Tomi rapped the table, an expression of genuine displeasure crossing her face. My mistake, no need to hesitate over it at all. The victims are clearly the distillery owner, and the innocent members of the public who drank the liquor without knowing what it contained. Amamiya Rin gave a slow nod and said, his voice low and even. How could you say that? That's awful. Not only do you fail to stand up for the woman closest to you, you shove all the blame onto a victim like me. Boo-hoo. Tomi dabbed at the corners of her eyes with one finger in an exaggerated show of grief, tears that didn't exist, her tone dripping with theatrical affectation. What are your plans for dealing with the distillery situation? Amamiya Rin refused to play along. He went straight to the point, sinking his thoughts into the Tomi network, to probe at whatever the Tomis were planning. But the moment he did, his expression stiffened. You're actually going to? He never would have imagined Kawakami Tomi would go that far. Unethical, undeniably. But ruthlessly efficient. It would resolve the distillery problem with ease. Underscore. Walnut-chan, winky face. New history, all my employees are naughty girls. Help smash these goals. 100 power stones equals +1 bonus chapter for everyone. Chapter 108, Keeping the Appointment. 1364 words. Ahaha, don't sweat the small stuff. The unstable element is dealt with, they'll never sell the brew again, and we walked away with a fat stack of cash, so isn't that just wonderful? Kawakami Tomi rested her chin in her hands and smiled serenely. It is not wonderful. A look of quiet disapproval passed through Amamiya Rin's eyes. The problem solved and the money secured, what more could you possibly want? Don't be greedy. Reach for everything and you'll end up with nothing. Tomi let the smile drop. She propped both hands under her chin and delivered this verdict with the utmost gravity. Getting lectured by you of all people, how could I be having a dream like this? Amamiya Rin shook his head in resignation, picked up his spoon, and scooped a wonton into his mouth. His actions said everything his words did not, tacit acceptance. Today he would observe, watching how the Tomis handled things from the sidelines before passing any judgment. Amamiya Rin made no effort to block his thoughts. The Tomis knew his intentions perfectly well. Kawakami Tomi gave a small shrug, rose to her feet, her skirt tracing a smooth arc through the air. I'm off. Take your time finishing up. Like a haughty Persian cat, Kawakami Tomi glided out of the restaurant with unhurried elegance. Amamiya Rin watched her go, then quietly finished the rest of his noodles, settled the bill, and walked out leaning on his cane. The morning sun was sharp against his eyes. He stood at the roadside, turning over the day's plans in his mind. He had given Tomi 1.5 million. That left him with 2 million, not quite a lot, not quite a little, and for his circumstances, nowhere near enough. Forget it. I'll just buy a used Jeep to get around, he muttered under his breath. He had originally planned to buy new, but now it was clear that was off the table. He caught a bus, transferring several times, until he finally arrived at the used car lot on the outskirts of the city. After much browsing, haggling, and back and forth, he eventually parted with just over 1 million yen, and drove away in a battered old Jeep that had clearly seen some years. The frame was solid, the clearance was high, the interior was spacious. The bodywork had a few scratches, but the engine note was steady and deep, and the overall condition looked dependably roadworthy. Paperwork signed and paid, Amamiya Rin climbed into the driver's seat. He looked at the thin sheaf of Fukuzawa Yukichi banknotes remaining in his wallet, and allowed himself a small, tired smile. Money really did evaporate without warning. 3 million in savings, nearly gone in a single day. At that moment his phone rang. He pulled it out. Unknown caller, number withheld. Amamiya Rin's gaze sharpened. He pressed accept immediately. A woman's voice came through, familiar and yet not. Unsurprisingly, it was the woman who held the clues to the serial murder case. You didn't show up yesterday afternoon. The word sounded like an accusation, but her tone was unexpectedly level. My apologies. Something came up unexpectedly. Let's arrange a new time. Amamiya Rin didn't elaborate. He kept his apology clean and simple. You picked the time and place this time. The woman didn't press him on it and said so generously. Same location. Time, 3 o'clock this afternoon. Amamiya Rin glanced at the time on his phone screen and relayed it to her. I'll be there on the dot. I hope this time there won't be any more incidents. If we don't catch the killer soon, there will be another victim before long. She accepted the proposal without hesitation, though her reply carried an unmistakable undercurrent of warning. The call ended. The dial tone droned in his ear. Amamiya Rin pocketed his phone and moved immediately. Only, he was not heading straight to the meeting point. Instead, he drove to Subsports Club. Stepping back into the gym for the second time, Amamiya Rin went through registration and payment with easy familiarity. Then the training began. The specially made restriction bands were wound tightly around his upper arms and thighs. The staff cinched them hard, the bands sinking deep into flesh, throttling circulation. Then the bottle was brought out, its contents surging with violent carbonation, and placed in front of him. Amamiya Rin pulled the tab and tilted his head back, draining it in one continuous pour. The liquid detonated down his esophagus in a torrent of explosive bubbles, his stomach ballooned outward as if it might burst, the violent bloating and tearing pain blacking out his vision, bringing him to the edge of vomiting. The staff immediately looped a band across his mouth and cinched it fast behind his head, sealing off any possibility of release. In that instant, Amamiya Rin felt as though he had become an enormous balloon, body both feather-light and crushingly heavy at once, swaying, barely keeping his feet. The staff came up behind him and shepherded him and the other trainees into the enormous pressure chamber. A heavy metallic clang as the hatch sealed shut, and then, inconceivable pressure closed in from every direction at once. The air turned solid in an instant. His eardrums caved inward. An invisible force clamped around his chest. The grotesque, pregnancy-sized swell of his stomach was crushed flat, his limbs shriveled to dry sticks, his blood seemed to stop moving entirely, every organ in his body was squeezed back against his spine, compressed into a single column of bone and flesh. Agony worse than death crashed through Amamiya Rin's mind, wave after wave. It was not his first time in the pressure training chamber, but that kind of suffering offered no immunity, no adaptation. And no matter how many times he endured it, Amamiya Rin still could not fathom why he was still alive. Every organ squeezed back against his spine, that was not a figure of speech. That was fact. He could feel it. His viscera had been compacted into a single mass. Anywhere else in the world, he would already be dead. An eternity seemed to pass, a full century compressed into the span of it, and then the pressure vanished all at once. The hatch opened. Amamiya Rin and the other trainees collapsed to the floor like men whose bones had been extracted, unable to move. The staff dragged them out and left them propped against the wall to recover. It took Amamiya Rin no small amount of time before he could gather himself again, and even then, every limb ached to the marrow, still too heavy to move properly. He looked up at the wall clock. 2 in the afternoon. Amamiya Rin drew a slow, deep breath, summoned what strength he could, steadied himself to a sitting position, let his eyes fall half-closed, and eased into a state of dhyana. Inside the Tomi network, the 30-odd Kawakami Tomis remaining in Tokyo had long since selected today's human vessel. Amamiya Rin used contemplative sight to lock on with precision, and synchronized his consciousness across. A brief, disorienting sense of separation, then Amamiya Rin opened his eyes. His field of vision had shifted. His height was a little lower. But the exhaustion and pain in his body had eased considerably. He looked around. He was standing beside a quiet street, the afternoon sun falling warm and soft on fair-skinned arms. Without wasting another moment, Amamiya Rin set off at once, arriving at the agreed cafe with time to spare before 3 o'clock. He pushed open the cafe door. A small bell chimed overhead. Gentle music drifted through the air. Amamiya Rin chose a window seat with a clear line of sight to the entrance, settled in, and waited for the woman who held the clues to the serial murder case to arrive. _______. Plus 40 ch, Walnut Chan. New history, Samsara game, starting with Shirogane K. Let's achieve our community goals. 100 Power Stones equals plus 1 extra chapter for everybody. Chapter 109, Implanting Flesh Bud. 1,345 words. A young waiter approached promptly, professional smile in place, but the moment his eyes landed on Amamiya Rin's face, he visibly faltered, the tips of his ears going red. Hello, what can I get for you? A glass of ice water, please. Amamiya Rin modulated his vocal cords, letting his voice come out with its faint, cool edge, pleasant to the ear, and nothing more. The waiter looked mildly crestfallen, but dutifully went off and returned shortly with a glass of ice water. Amamiya Rin picked up the glass. The chill of it seeped into his fingertips. He sipped slowly, his gaze resting mostly on the street outside the window, drifting occasionally to the cafe entrance and the wall clock. Time ticked by second. 3 o'clock. 3:10. 3:20. The woman had yet to appear. Amamiya Rin was not particularly bothered, women being late was the most natural thing in the world. What he didn't know was that while the woman had failed to turn up at the cafe, the Kawakami Tomi, who had set out for the distillery, was already nearly at her destination. Kawakami Tomi stepped off the bus at the roadside and looked up. In the distance, ridges of mountains layered one behind the other, their silhouettes crisp and clean in the afternoon sun. Scattered at their base were low, modest houses, and a concrete road stretched from the highway's edge deep into the village, flanked on both sides by orderly fields where a few villagers were working the land. Tomi walked the concrete road into the village, her high heels clicking sharply against the cracked surface with each step. Before long, she arrived at her destination, a sake brewery that had clearly been renovated and expanded in recent times. The original structure was traditional wood frame construction, but right beside it, a brand new concrete factory building had risen from the ground, far larger than the old one. Old and new stood together within a spacious compound. A simple security booth had been set up at the entrance. 2 box trucks sat parked in the yard, and several workers in matching uniforms were busy loading sealed wooden crates onto them. The guard in the booth was a man of around 50. Seeing a visitor at the gate, he stepped out promptly, voice rough and blunt. "Hey, miss. This is a restricted work area, no unauthorized personnel." Tomi stopped. She tilted her chin up slightly, her gaze sweeping lazily across him. I'm here to see whoever's in charge. Do you have an appointment? The guard planted himself in her path and asked, dutifully doing his job. An appointment? I don't need anything like that. I'm going in. Move. Tomi stated the unreasonable as though it were perfectly obvious, as though this brewery were her own territory, and the guard's face went momentarily slack with disbelief. Without another word, she lifted her foot and walked forward. The guard moved to stop her. Tomi swayed to one side, slipping past him with a dancer's ease, and in the same motion her right hand snapped out like a whip, driving the blade of her palm into the side of his neck. He didn't even manage a grunt before he crumpled to the ground. Tomi despised being argued with. She despised even more the current state of affairs, where even an unremarkable, homely man like this felt entitled to give her trouble. So she had no objection whatsoever to being rough about it. The loading workers in the yard stopped what they were doing, staring over in bewilderment. Tomi ignored their stares. Her gaze swept over the old and new buildings in turn, paused briefly, then turned toward the new factory, the one that looked more important. Hey! What do you think you're doing? Two of the workers set down their crates and strode toward her, shouting. Oh my! Instead of running, you're actually walking toward me. Tomi didn't slow down by a single step. She moved with that languid, swaying gait of hers, and a cold, vicious smile curled at the corner of her mouth. The workers couldn't fathom what had gotten into her, until they had closed to within a meter. Just as they reached out to grab her, Tomi's arms swelled like rising dough, inflating a full size larger, and their length stretched out by several dozen centimeters in a way that defied all reason. Two enormous hands seized the workers by the heads and smashed them together. The impact produced a dull, meaty thud. Tomi let go. Both workers rolled their eyes back and collapsed. The remaining four workers flinched back, recoiling in unison, their faces a picture of stunned, uncomprehending alarm. Tomi drew a deep breath. Her legs unleashed a savage burst of raw power. Before the workers could even react, she was simply there, standing in front of them, having crossed the distance in an eye blink, trailing a small cloud of dust. Thud. 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 Four dull impacts, nearly simultaneous. All four workers folded like overcooked noodles and went down. Tomi stood over the fallen men, an odd smile playing across her face. She raised her right hand. The nail of her index finger lengthened and sharpened at an unnatural speed, its edge catching the light with a hard, keratinous gleam. Tomi tilted her head, as if considering where to begin. Then, without the slightest hesitation, she pressed that razor-sharp nail against her own right temple and began to bore. The needlepoint nail drilled through skin and flesh with ease, sinking in deep. Tomi's expression didn't flicker. Her fingertip probed around inside for a moment, scraping and scooping, and then she withdrew it. Wedged in the groove of her nail was a small smear of dark red tissue. Tomi crouched down, used that same sharp nail to pierce the forehead of the nearest unconscious worker, drilling open a small hole, and pressed the flesh she had taken from her own temple into it. Then she smoothed it over with a stroke of her thumb. Done. She stood and went about doing the same to each of the other unconscious workers, one by one. Before long, the first worker to receive an implanted flesh bud began to twitch faintly. The eyeballs beneath his closed lids moved rapidly back and forth. A low, formless sound rattled in his throat. Seconds later, his eyes snapped open, vacant and unfocused, no awareness behind them. Moving with a slight stiffness, he pressed his hands to the ground and pushed himself upright. Hey, how is it? Can you control that body? Kawakami Tomi regarded the man before her with a look of lively curiosity and asked. What a peculiar way to play. But why should I cooperate with you? A consciousness transmitted itself from within the man. It was the Tomi awareness contained within the flesh bud, the piece of Kawakami Tomi's own tissue that had been implanted in his forehead. These fragments of flesh, carrying Tomi's cranial nerve cells, lacked the power to assimilate males, but they possessed the ability to seize control of a male body, much like a parasitic organism. When the consciousness dormant within those flesh cell fragments awoke, the cranial nerves embedded in them would naturally connect to the Tomi network, and they would swiftly come to understand what had happened. I am not using a man's body. The other 3 workers rose to their feet one by one as well, each broadcasting waves of resentment toward the Kawakami Tomi standing before them. What they truly wanted, was to immediately drain every last drop of life force from the males they were parasitizing, reconstitute themselves, and restore Kawakami Tomi's proper form. Not to demean themselves by languishing inside the bodies of a handful of ordinary men. ________. Wentmore, Walnut-chan. New history, Samsara game, starting with Shiregain K. Let's reach these milestones together. 100 Power Stones equals +1 free chapter for all readers. Chapter 110, The Courage Test Show Does Every Evil Deed. 1,453 words. Enough. Amamiya Rins will cut through the squabbling Tomis. Far away in Tokyo, Amamiya Rin lifted his glass of ice water, took a sip and frowned. Why didn't anyone bother to verify first whether these loading workers had ever been exposed to Tomi's influence? At lunch that morning, the plan he had received through the Tomi network had been straightforward enough. Go to the distillery, identify the men who had been driven mad by Tomi, implant flesh buds in their bodies, wait for the Tomi consciousness within those fragments to awaken, and then have the newly manifested Tomis take control of those men, thereby seizing the distillery and claiming the revenue from Tomi's brewed products. In practice, however, Tomi had been far too rough about it. She hadn't checked at all whether her targets had actually been affected. Oh, it's a minor thing, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. Tomi's attitude was exactly as expected, breezy and unbothered, not giving the slightest thought to the lives of ordinary people. Then allow me to assist you in contemplating the 5 aggregates, severing your afflictions, shattering your attachment to self and phenomena, and guiding you gently toward nirvanic liberation. I wholeheartedly wish to help you attain Buddhahood. I do hope you won't mind. The thought arose in Amamiya Rin's mind, and he was on the verge of helping Kawakami Tomi directly realize the state wherein all phenomena are empty of inherent nature. Wait. I was joking. Why are you taking it so seriously? Being this serious is how you end up with no friends, you know. Kawakami Tomi hastily backed down, and even as the words left her, her hands were already driving into the foreheads of the loading workers, her movements lightning fast. The few fragment bodies, each no larger than a fingernail, had absolutely no time to react. By the time they registered what had happened, they were already sitting in the palm of Kawakami Tomi's hand. And the rest of you, behave yourselves. If you get too rowdy, Rin-kun is going to get angry. Kawakami Tomi pinched the little scraps of flesh between her fingers and smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes, as she issued the threat. Through the connection of the Tomi network, even if she were to burn those flesh fragments to ash, they would simply grow back. With her immortal body elevated to such a degree, Kawakami Tomi had only one natural enemy, the dhyana cultivation of Amamiya Rin. Were that not the case, she would never have dared to dig flesh containing cranial nerve cells out of her own skull. Damn you. Don't push it. Keeping us trapped inside these disgusting men's bodies indefinitely, I will absolutely snap. Exactly. Being stuck inside a stinking man is even worse than dhyana, and it's not like Amamiya Rin can maintain dhyana 24 hours without a break. But Tomi would not capitulate so easily. Waves of defiant intent radiated out toward Kawakami Tomi. If they were going to suffer either way, there was no reason to bow their heads to some other counterfeit. 1 week. Just 1 week, after that, other counterfeits rotate in for their shift. Kawakami Tomi immediately put forward her terms. She wouldn't admit it openly, but these were still Tomi after all. She had anticipated from the start that they wouldn't accept so easily, and had come prepared. With their minds connected through the network, every consideration Kawakami Tomi had weighed was instantly transparent to the others. Negotiation was pointless. They had no choice but to hold their noses and accept her arrangement. At the same moment, Amamiya Rin heard the coach's call for the second round of compression training to begin. He gradually withdrew his attention, and found that the gym staff had already started putting him to the rack. That was not a figure of speech. Not in the slightest. The staff had already secured him into the torture device known as the Saposhi. When the rope snapped taut, the wooden board at his front slammed into his abdomen and crushed his viscera, the board at his back ground into his shoulder blades and spine as if trying to pulverize them. His arms, twisted behind him, emitted a series of crackling pops at the joints. Enormous pressure bore down from front and back simultaneously, as though his body were about to be sheared clean through. Every bone in his body screamed. The agony crashed over his nerves in waves, like a tempest-lashed sea. The veins in Amamiya Rin's forehead stood out in ridges, his jaw shuddered beyond his control, his vision blurred at the edges. That unbearable, searing pain propagated outward through the Tomi network, and even filtered through the static of the other Tomi's scattered thoughts. Enough of it came through for them to feel it as their own. In the cafe, Kawakami Tomi's brow twitched sharply. The hand gripping her glass tightened by degrees, but she forced herself to bear Amamiya Rin's savage agony, maintaining her composure in full view of everyone around her, not allowing a single crack to show. Just then, the bell above the door chimed. Kawakami Tomi glanced toward the cafe entrance, and saw a woman push her way inside. The new arrival was reasonably attractive, though leagues behind Tomi herself. Her jet-black hair was pulled back in a clean ponytail, she wore a black base with a light gray cardigan, and looked to be somewhere in her mid to late 20s. That combination of details matched precisely what the woman had described to Amamiya Rin over the phone, as their means of mutual identification. "Hey! Over here!" Kawakami Tomi set her glass down with a heavy clunk and waved the woman over. The woman spotted Kawakami Tomi. A flicker of involuntary surprise and puzzlement crossed her eyes, there and gone in an instant. She walked over quickly and said in a low voice, "You're the one who arranged to meet me." Kawakami Tomi tilted her head and propped her chin on the back of her hand. "You've already taken up 3 days of Rinkuen's time," she said, without bothering to soften it. "Don't waste any more of mine. Get to the point, and let me deal with it cleanly." The woman hesitated, studying Kawakami Tomi's face, but at those words, she confirmed that the beauty sitting before her was indeed the friend Amamiya Rin had mentioned on the phone. "I'm sorry. Something came up that I really couldn't leave, so I'm late." The woman sat down across from Kawakami Tomi, rubbed her right eye, and continued. "My name is Hayashi Naoko. And you?" "Tomi." "Kawakami Tomi." Kawakami Tomi's lips curved upward in that proud way of hers. "Ms. Kawakami." The woman called Hayashi Naoko trailed off after saying Kawakami Tomi's surname, at a loss for what came next. She studied Tomi with a guarded, uncertain look, as if she could not quite convince herself that the woman before her would actually be of any help, rather than simply becoming another victim. "Stop wasting time, plain face. Unlike you, my time is extremely precious." Kawakami Tomi tapped the tabletop with her fingers, irritation rising. She had far less patience for unremarkable men and women than for men of exceptional quality, especially now, when she was simultaneously enduring the violent physical sensations feeding through from Amamiya Rin while still maintaining a normal conversation with the woman in front of her. All for the sake of some errand Rin wanted handled, which she personally couldn't care less about. Hayashi Naoko's expression darkened slightly. No woman could simply absorb that kind of treatment from Tomi. But she held herself together. However unpleasant Tomi's manner, she had still come here to help, because Naoko had asked. "I used to work as a makeup artist. Things were going fairly well for me in the industry, and among the talents I worked with was a household name pop star. Kawahara Miyuki." Hayashi Naoko looked down, and began to recount the story from the beginning. "The longer we knew each other, the closer we got. She used to always say my eyes were beautiful. But after that summer courage test program, she changed completely. Became a totally different person. Beautiful eyes. Two plain women complimenting each other to feel better. Kawakami Tomi let out a contemptuous little laugh, entirely missing the point, and managing to be cutting in the process. Underscore 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 underscore. He. Walnut-chan for more chapters. New history, Samsara game, starting with Shirogane K. Help us reach these goals. 100 Power Stones equals +1 Universal Bonus Chapter. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Novels Wonderland.